I was such a skeptic beforehand. Anna was sort of saying that she didn't know how to pray. She wanted to start a kind of prayer and practice and a dialogue. Then, and in a dream, she heard a voice saying Luke 11:1. And I was like, oh, well,
I want to see what Alexa says. Hang on one second here.
Luke chapter 11 verse 1. One of his disciples said unto him, Lord, teach us to pray.
That's one of three very vivid, biblical dreams.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide. And we see God. We see his hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. So glad you're here for episode 148, Paint by Numbers, a story of conversion. You do paint by numbers as a kid? I loved paint by numbers. It was during my artistic years. I didn't get much beyond that. Well, this episode has a real artist, a painter. His name is Edward. He and Anna are from the UK. They're both artists in two different media, but they live in the UK, agnostic, atheist, that kind of thing. But Edward, about 4 years ago in his late 20s, he and Anna had a child, and it was right around there that God was shooting off this flare gun, as I like to call it, trying to get their attention. And he did it by shooting numbers at them. That's what we call this paint by numbers. God just, kind of like shooting this thing. Take some of these numbers. Sometimes these numbers had words attached to them. And it was one of those deals where when they looked at the numbers, was this random? This can't be random. If these numbers aren't random, then there's a God, that kind of thing. And God just kind of reeling them in by including them in the process. That's why I like this episode. It's not Jesus appearing and saying, this is the way, no, this was very subtle, just kind of moment to moment, kind of just, hi, here I am, and drawing them in closer. This paint by numbers, a story of conversion. Untouched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God.
Oh, amazing. You sound just like you do on the radio.
Imagine that. Imagine that. How did you find us, Ed?
How did we find you? I think Anna found you guys, actually, your podcast.
And what kind of paint do you do? What kind of artistry?
Sort of like realist oil painting.
So you have two people with real creative jobs here, so you don't know when you're working.
Yeah, it's not exactly like a recipe for making loads of money. But sort of weirdly, we're both on a sort of similar kind of journey of discovery, I suppose, is the best way to describe it. But,
okay.
Yeah, she found your podcast and she just loves it. And, well, we both love it now.
And what came to mind as you guys were listening, as far as your own story?
We're sort of really interested, I think, in sort of the angel stuff, particularly. That's
right.
Kind of quite amazing. I feel like we've kind of been getting synchronicities with numbers. I feel like that's been a thing for a couple of years now. Yeah, I don't know where that sort of sits with Orthodox Christianity. If you want to
numbers
put it that
can
way.
mean something. Biblically, numbers have tremendous meaning.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I mean, 7 does mean something and 3 does mean something. And, so yeah,
sure.
10 commandments do mean something. But in terms of your upbringing and such, was there much Christianity in it, or is this kind of a later thing, or how would you describe it?
Well, my parents were both born and raised Catholic, and were just sort of agnostic all through my childhood.
So does that mean they didn't push it, or you just didn't buy it?
They didn't push it, and they weren't churchgoers. There was no kind of going to church on Sundays or anything like that. And I was kind of atheist as like a stance kind of thing. I was kind of actively inquiring into the nature of the universe from quite a young age, and I kind of reasoned my way away from any kind of divine source or any kind of intelligent design. I was sort of against the idea of there being a God, which is quite a sort of, it's almost like a religious way of thinking about
I've totally, atheism is a religion. That is a religion. Oh yeah, people are trying to sell atheism all the time. It's a faith. And it takes more faith to be, I think, an atheist than a Christian. It takes far more faith to think that everything is just an accident.
Yeah, well, it's you can get into some dark places, like thinking everything is sort of meaningless, or meaningless to the point where things seem to have, as though the universe has a sort of trickster mentality of like, life is hard for the sake of it. And it's, I mean, I've kind of I'm completely the other side of things now. But
what started turning it for you? What started making you wonder?
Well, the reason I sort of brought up the numbers thing was it's been a kind of like a slow burn. Our daughter was born, and she happened to be born on 11 minutes past 1 on the day she was born. So 111. And then I was listening to this podcast several months later, and they were talking about synchronicity, and some people call them angel numbers, but I don't think people know what they are, but that's what people call them. And they were talking about sort of synchronicities and coincidence, and I was thinking that's a load of nonsense, and they said you'll get 111 to wake you up to let you know that you're being contacted. And as they said that, I was thinking that's nonsense, and I turned it off and I walked into this takeaway place to get some food because we just moved into a new house, and they gave me a ticket number and it was 111. I was like, oh, that's strange. Maybe not then. And so that it didn't, that didn't confirm for me one way or the other, but what it kind of, I guess, woke me up to was that the universe was enchanted. But it kind of made me realize maybe reality is, there's a bit more going on than the everyday kind of waking moments of reality.
Maybe there's a hand in this somewhere. Yeah.
Right.
So,
yeah.
okay.
And actually, before that, the day our daughter was born, for 24 hours, I just had this, and I'm sure this is probably a common experience, but I don't know because I've only experienced it myself. But I just had this kind of like unconditional love and compassion for everyone and everything for 24, 48 hours. And it was just kind of like bliss of like, I just felt at peace. For the first time in my life, it kind of made me think that everything is essentially good. And it's only the kind of the grime of everyday life, which is kind of like covering that all up. Whereas I think before, my kind of general mode of being was that life is hard and everything, the kind of the Buddhist idea of like life is suffering kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And we're just trying to get through it. Whereas this was a kind of life is love, and you're allowing yourself to be blinded to that reality because you're too concerned with things which don't matter.
Yeah.
We've just had lots of sort of weird things. I mean, going back to the angel thing, we had that thing with our second baby where my partner felt 3 like audible taps on the bed, and it woke her up, and she checked the baby, and the cover had slipped onto her face, so she pulled it off immediately. Then she woke me up.
Was the baby in danger? Was the baby?
Well, perhaps she could have been if the quilt had sort of been left on her face for any length of time. We just feel like it was, just like a nudge to kind of like, hey guys.
But she heard something. She heard the tap 3 times.
She felt and heard like 3 rhythmic concentric taps on the bed.
And her mind goes to the baby, and off she goes to check.
Immediately.
Yeah.
So we've also had I don't know where this falls into the category of messages from angelic beings or how you define it, but my Anna was sort of saying that she didn't know how to pray. She wanted to start a kind of prayer practice and a dialogue, but she didn't know where to begin. And she was talking about this, and bearing in mind neither of us are kind of like experts on the Bible. And in a dream, she heard a voice saying Luke 11:1. So she told me about this dream, and I was like, oh, let's check Luke. And we went, and it's Jesus teaching the Lord's Prayer. and it's like, Lord, teach us to pray. And,
Hold on one second here, okay? I'm going to go get Alexa.
Sure,
I want to see what Alexa says. Hang on one second here. Yes, second.
Sorry, I should have checked.
No. This is more entertaining this way, so don't worry about it. Read Luke chapter 11, verse 1.
Luke chapter 11, verse 1. And it came to pass, that, as he was praying in a certain place, when he ceased, one of his disciples said unto him, Lord, teach us to pray.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, and it's, that maybe one of the last things Anna said before she went to bed that night was, I don't know how to pray.
Wow.
That's one of 3 very vivid, biblical dreams.
111. Look at you.
Literally biblical dreams we've had. It's
really. So what are the other ones?
Well, I'm quite I'm very. I don't take my work lightly. I'm kind of talking about it and thinking about it at least all the time. It's not just something I pick up and do as a hobby. I'm sort of thinking about it all the time, but to the point where I can kind of stress about it and worry about it too much. And I went to bed just in a real bad mood once, and about my work, and not thinking I didn't have enough time to do it, and thinking how much more successful I'd be if I did have time, and all of this, just any kind of negative emotion you can imagine in relation to an art practice that was just running through my head. And I woke up in the earlier hours of the morning with thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or that is in the earth beneath. I was like, what?
Wait a minute, all those words came to mind?
Well, it was thou shalt not make any graven image or any likeness of anything.
Okay.
That's what was going around in a circle in my head.
Okay.
And I woke up and I jumped out of it. It's like I had one other dream where I'd had an audible voice in my head, but it was so strange. A voice was coming to me from somewhere else.
I think of that particular reading as, don't put false gods, before
exactly.
me.
Yeah.
And work can be a false god. I mean, the Lord knows.
Exactly. Not to make painting your God, not to put it before him, not to put it before family. And that kind of was confirmed to me, the second biblical dream I had, which was, again, recently, just sort of going to bed in a really bad mood, thinking about my work, and then waking up with Isaiah 2:3. But this time it wasn't a voice. It was, I could just see Isaiah 2:3, and I've never even looked at Isaiah. Many peoples will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. Come to God. Oh, and my translation was that, come to God, you're worshipping the wrong things. That whole book seems to be about, Israel being punished for going off the tracks.
Yeah, they did. They did. They did worship false gods, and they did get off track, and they invited those who were not believers into it. All of a sudden, you had this hybrid of people who had pagan gods, and then this God of Abraham. So yeah, it got a little bit of a mishmash there. But but Isaiah, and once again, you got the numbers of Isaiah. Didn't know what it meant yet. Am I correct?
No, yeah, I'd never even. I mean, I'd heard of Isaiah, but I'd never even looked at it physically.
So you went and looked at it, and you once again got this whole thing about what are your priorities and who are your gods, basically. Who is your God?
And what's interesting about that particular book, and I guess Isaiah the prophet, is that the people of God have already been chosen, but they've gone off track, and they're having to be kind of guided back onto the right path.
Yeah.
And I feel that was even kind of relevant to my own thing. But then I'd still got knocked off course and started worrying about money, worrying about painting, and rather than putting my trust in the greater power,
Yeah.
And that was actually after. So one morning I prayed specifically. I said I don't want fame, I don't want fortune. I just, please help me make a living from doing what I feel like I've been put on this planet to do, from making artwork. Like, please help me be the person who I feel I ought to be, and help me support my family from that. And 2 hours later, I got this huge painting commission. And that just seemed to be like here you go. Wow. Just in case you were wondering. Hey, and then in the day after, I got a second commission. And then 2 days after that, I got a third commission. But bearing in mind, I haven't had a commission in like 10 years.
Wow, and you got 3 in a row.
Yeah, 3 in 4 days or something.
And 3, once again, God loves that number 3. Yeah, there you go. Got that Trinity thing going. That's incredible.
That's right.
And that is a God number when you think about, I've heard it said that like 7, and we'll get back to what you just said and everything, but like 7, the day of rest is actually a combination of 3 being a God number and 4, which is a people number. So it's kind of like divinity and humanity joined together on day 7 where we all rest together. So all these numbers kind of combine with each other as well. But to get 3 in a row like that after praying, I'm just trying to support a family here, right? I'm just trying to and keep everything in priority. But wow, what a gift! What a blessing! This is I mean, talk about people ask for signs all the time and aren't getting this kind of stuff. You're getting your signs.
I was such a skeptic beforehand that some of it's so on the nose, because it's kind of like it's like a flick between the eyebrows kind of thing. Like, this is real.
We'll take a pause right here and get back to Edward. Paint by Numbers, a story of conversion. And coming up, part of his story has to do with New Age, aliens, UFOs. Those are connected? Those are definitely connected. And also in this conversion story, I want to mention another conversion story, maybe reversion, if you want to call it that. Our Patreon shout-out is Isaac Hansen. And Isaac had a conversion a while back. I was talking to him, his mom, Robin, dad, Christopher, and it's a story you may be hearing on an upcoming episode. But in the process, they started talking about Isaac. He'd kind of gone off the rails, and how they started listening to this podcast, and it was, bringing him back and everything. I'm not even, I'll tell you how, I didn't know they were talking about Touched by Heaven. They were just talking about this podcast, and I'm kind of, and I'm oblivious. This isn't false humility. This is just me being stupid until it finally dawns on me. Oh, they're talking about this podcast. But this podcast has meant so much to Isaac in bringing him closer to God that he has become a Patreon supporter. So Isaac is our shout out this week. But this was part of our conversation.
There's something very special about him. But, getting late high school age, he started going off the track, and he graduated. But he was definitely in bad shape, in my mind. At a certain point in time, he was in bad shape. Isaac was. And I thought, oh, my gosh, and Robin had a dream not too long ago. The dream that she had was Isaac made a hairpin U-turn in this dream, okay? All of a sudden, Isaac is just a totally different person. He did a hairpin U-turn, and he was coming to me. He was showing me these podcasts. Every day when he comes home from work, he's listening to these podcasts. Well, Isaac, he tried to get out of the mess before, but he couldn't do it. Well, anyway, these podcasts have been, in my estimation or way I look at it, is the podcast had a lot to do with it. But Isaac is a totally different person. He's a sponge to the Bible. He's reading the Bible. He's being bold about his faith to a point of telling people about it. He's not going to change. I mean, this is a hairpin U-turn.
When did this start? How many years ago?
It just started like a month ago.
Oh, this is just a month ago. Wow.
Yeah. And he's been listening to your podcast.
Yeah, he's been listening to you, and it's really done amazing things for him.
It's been remarkable how he's clung to the podcasts and how they have built his faith. And overnight, he's turned into a little disciple himself overnight.
Hey, Isaac, can you explain it? What happened?
I can't really explain it, to be honest. I kept noticing just things as miracles in my life, and just noticing how, I don't know, it's just, everything changed for me. He explained it pretty well, the hairpin turn thing, because I I really wasn't on the right path, and started listening to these podcasts, and they were very fortifying to me, and just hearing other people's perspectives and all that, it helped tremendously.
He said your voice is very soothing and that he really likes to sit back and relax and listen.
Yeah, I thought, like, I really like this guy. I don't know why I like this guy so much.
Yeah, I don't know either. And the voice is a rental. I got to turn it back in. Normally, it's kind of more like this, but well, God bless. That's awesome. That's heartwarming. But I think a lot of it has to do sometimes, Isaac, with a mother's prayers and a father's prayers. So
Yeah.
I think prayers got answered here too.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Isaac. Our Patreon shout out this week, Isaac Hansen. And thanks again, Christopher Robin. Where have I heard this before? Christopher? Anyway, thanks so much. Very cool to hear that. If these episodes have been a blessing to you, maybe bringing you closer to God and your relationship and all that, and would like to help us out on a monthly basis as well, you can come here to episode 148 and just click through to Patreon or go to patreon.com and search for Trapper Jack. And we appreciate so much your support to keep this all going. All right, let's get back to more of Edward, Paint by Numbers, a story of conversion, here on Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God.
I understand that it's about like believing with your heart and not your head. But I feel like some of these things are kind of like, you know, like a gentle tap on the back of the head, like wake up.
Yeah, but you're following. You're following these little nudges and hints and whispers and all that. So you guys are looking. You're looking, and Anna's looking, aren't you? I get a sense that you're trying to find a purpose in all of this.
But you know what? Like I don't feel like it's not confirmation bias. It's not like I don't feel like we're just randomly picking and choosing things out of the ether which confirm our prejudice. Do you know what I mean? It's like we're literally being woken up in the middle of the night with chapter and verse. It's like, oh, let me just go check that kind of thing. I mean, I've started praying every day. It's just basically just like a list of thank yous. That's how I kind of just start the day. Just sort of speak to what I'm glad, I'm thankful for, and include as many other people in that as well. But you know, we don't have any kind of, especially with the current situation, we haven't got any sort of church going practices. So we're kind of finding our way.
Well, it's in England, it's not exactly faith is not on fire over there.
No, certainly not. It's it's strange enough that we both sort of arrived at it at the same time, because neither of us were that way inclined.
Well, you know, and my thing with Touched by Heaven is, and I think this, and I really do contend that the reason that church is on the decline here in the U.S., even more so in Canada and even more so in Europe, is because of that lack of connection to the miraculous. Call it synchronicity, call it those Touched by Heaven moments, those what everything you've said so far is in South America where the church is growing, in Africa where it's on fire, India, Philippines, all these places where it's growing, they are embracing exactly what you're talking about, these beautiful signs of angels and the miraculous. They embrace them. Whereas here above the equator, we're having a hard time linking ourselves to the early church, which was exploding because of this. They wrote about it in the Bible, about angels and miraculous healings and divine interventions. And we just kind of go about, we're not grabbing onto that to the way the below the equator is grabbing onto that.
There also seems to be like a humor to it, like that I can't quite put my finger on sometimes.
Good for you.
You know what I mean?
I absolutely. I get that all the time. I get the joke
just in the way that you're kind of like, okay, you want you want a commission? Here's a commission. It's like, I don't know. I mean, it sounds ridiculous saying this, but like sometimes you do think in these kind of weird ways. But I was thinking like, wow, I don't seem to have the problem with Christianity that I thought I had. You know, if that's what they're selling, then like, I can get on board with that.
I use a word. I don't know if it's that. This is the word it came to me as these kinds of things were happening to me. Also, it's a seduction. There's like this gentle reeling you in, this seduction, lining you up, and then and as the deeper you go, the better it gets.
Yeah.
And the deeper you go, and I mean, man, he put you into the Bible pretty fast.
Yeah, and like it all kind of came from this coincidence, which that ticket stub I told you about, the 111. But what that kind of opened my mind to was like, how at the beginning of John it kind of talks about how the Word was with God and the Word was God, and that initial synchronicity, I kind of thought, well, if synchronicity is in fact real, then consciousness itself is somehow interwoven into the fabric of the cosmos. And that I'm just paraphrasing John. So that means God's real. That was the kind of like dawning moment as I was like standing there waiting for my food. I was like, oh, okay.
1 + 1 is 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a God. It's just this kind of, it's funny how you kind of have these like moments of realization when you're just sort of going about your life. Like,
that's kind of funny. 1 + 1 is 2. Yeah, there's a God. I'll take fries with that. Yeah, I'll take fries. Okay, thanks. I figured out God. Okay.
And I'm sort of making it sound just really dumb and stupid, but
no, it's not. This is real. You're hearing it. You're feeling it. You're getting the nudges. I hear music in my head. It'll just play.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I'm a big music fan. I love the references to songs you hear.
Yeah, and then when I spiritualize them, it's like, oh, that's what that meant. Okay, and I just spiritualize things when appropriate, when it makes sense.
I'm not describing them in their full color, if that makes sense.
Because they're knocking you off your feet, aren't they? And they're making you laugh and smile, and you're going, are you really in the room? That's a killer.
Right.
Are you really in the room? You're really in the room. You're listening to me. And that knowledge is so cool and exciting and inviting you into a relationship. Life is not just one random thing after another, that there actually is a purpose. There's actually a hand in all of this. And once you realize that, you can't be an agnostic anymore. You can't be an atheist anymore. You have to go, oh, there's a plan. There's a plan in all this, and I'm in that plan.
Interesting about the Catholicism as well. Like, I sort of, as a teenager, I was agnostic, atheist, whatever. But like every time I was in Europe, I was just sort of like drawn towards the Catholic churches, full of amazing Renaissance painting.
You're on a heck of a journey there, Ed. That's all I know. You and Anna both, you're on a heck of a journey, and he just keeps drawing you in closer. I'm going to see your art. We're all going to see your artwork change. We're going to see you're going to develop deeper into your relationship with Christ, both you and Anna. It's happening. You're in the midst of it.
It's, that idea that no one's beyond the pale, like everyone can be saved. It doesn't matter how selfish you've been.
I always equate it with video games. People get so excited on video games of going to the next level, the next level, the next level. When you experience a series of things like a Bible verse in the middle of the night in a dream, when you experience 111 at just the right opportune moment, when you are led to something, when you see the beauty in a church or whatever, it is so much greater than getting to the next level in a video game. And unless you've experienced it, you just don't understand that. And I pray that for everybody, to have that encounter moment where you go, wow, this is so much greater than anything the world has to offer.
Yeah. Alongside all this, there's definitely like, I sort of dipped my toe into New Age stuff. Shot back out of that quite quickly.
Good for you.
But in hindsight now, I feel like it's all kind of got the veneer of love and peace. Like UFOs and that kind of thing. But that's maybe all a bit too weird to talk about.
It's, it's actually part of the same animal, but...
Yeah, I saw a couple of UFOs.
That's yeah. Well, that's kind of connected to demons as well.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, and like
Now,
I've
you
kind of
say yeah,
done a bit more
exactly.
reading.
How do you know that? What have you been reading that tells you that?
I can't remember it word for word, but we battle not against the flesh, but the prince of the power of the air, or something. Is it Ephesians? And I don't know. It's just like the Bible is full of like descriptions of like sorcery, technological, magic. I mean, before I got into all of this, I was definitely like on the lookout for UFOs, and I saw a couple, and I wasn't filled with joy when I saw them. I was filled with amazement initially, but there wasn't any kind of. I didn't get this download of unconditional love that people talk about.
How close were they? How close?
Above the house, in the garden. But I was in the garden, I should say.
Making any sounds?
No, just this kind of light in the sky that seemed to be responding to my conscious thoughts.
Whoa! Explain your thinking and it's lighting up in a certain way. Explain that.
Well, I was out in the garden looking for them, basically, and
I mean, almost calling it in a sense.
Yeah, basically, but from a kind of like, if you guys are up there and you're friendly, let me see you kind of thing.
Is this when you were into New Age?
Yeah, and I mean, it was kind of I kind of been researching like
because it's connected. It's connected.
Well, right, and so this kind of sighting was followed by a very vivid like sort of sleep paralysis thing where I saw this like dark shadowy entity in the room looking at me, and I woke up and I couldn't move. And again, that would all be described by mainstream science as you're half in the waking state, half in the sleeping state. Your brain's turned your body off so that you don't act out your dreams, and that's just your sort of the reptile part of your brain like reacting to shadows in your room and thinking it's a predator kind of thing. But again, it was one of these things that was such a vivid experience. I appreciate all the neurological science that would have me believe something else, but this was like a real thing that happened to me. Mm-hmm. And Anna said, you don't know what you're contacting. You don't know what you're talking to when you be careful. And she said, if you're going to do it again, ask for protection first. So basically I saw things 6 times, and after that I said, when I say things, I saw lights in the sky, but I only had this kind of shadow thing once, but I had other nightmares. And after that I went out, I think 3 more times, but before I said, Jesus and Mary, like, protect me against any evil spirits that may want to cause me harm. I saw nothing.
Good.
And but I was kind of doing that. I mean, sounds incredibly like blasphemous, but to prove to myself that what I had seen was in fact something dark. Before I'd been ingesting all of this kind of new age stuff, and it's all from like a place, like there are these space brothers who are here to meet us, and they're just waiting for us to evolve and they're waiting for mankind to become better. Something out there will come down to our level and meet us. So in my head, I was doing this with this kind of idea that there are these benevolent things in the skies just waiting for us to kind of engage with them. But, I'd also, in relation to like demons and stuff, I'd heard people say like, if you invoke the name of Jesus Christ, they just disappear because he's the Lord,
Yeah.
He's in charge.
Amen. With New Age and such, The trouble is people are so open-minded to it all that just about anything will fall in. And that's the trouble. As Anna said, you don't know what you're dealing with, what you're inviting in. So that's the danger. But since you started invoking and all that, things have pretty much cleaned up.
Yeah. And like, I'm embarrassed to tell you that story, to be quite honest.
Don't be.
When I was engaged in it, it wasn't coming from a place of, there was no kind of like satanic worship intent or anything. It was like, oh, there's friends out there. Like, let's make some friends.
Not so much. Not so friends. Yeah, not so much.
Yeah.
So much.
So it's another little, yeah.
And that'll become more clear, I think, as time goes. And as time goes on, I think people will see the reality of what's going on around us out there, you know?
Again, like I think with Christianity, and you were saying how it's, you know, people aren't open to the miraculous side of things. I think as well, perhaps people are open to the idea of love and forgiveness, but then less willing to believe the darker side of the coin, you know, that evil exists.
Absolutely. That's victory. That's called victory from the other side. If we don't even believe it exists.
Part of me almost believed that God couldn't be real because evil wasn't real either. You know, it was just an unwillingness to look at any kind of absolute idea.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm good with all that. It's just cool to watch. I love conversion stories, and you're kind of in the process of one. We all are. We're all being converted, you know, when you get right down to it all the time, just going deeper all the time. And you're certainly experiencing that. So I can't thank you enough, Ed, for reaching out, buddy.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you for your amazing podcast. It's really inspiring. It's just great to sort of carry with us, get us through the day.
Thanks, Edward. Good luck with the artwork. Paint by Numbers, a story of conversion. And what I love about this episode is the subtlety, how God included them in the process. It wasn't a big apparition. This was, here, let me throw some numbers at you, figure it out. So he included them in the process. You know, the 111. Oh, that can't be. On a check, on a receipt, it just sets them up. Birth time, 111. Luke, 11:1. Oh, you want to learn how to pray? Lord's Prayer is a good place to start. Or the not worshiping graven images, false gods. Work certainly can be a god to people. So he's got them thinking commandments. He's got them thinking about prayer. He's and he just reel them in with all these different numbers and Bible verses and all. So just recently reading Mark 8. This is where Jesus is getting on the apostles' case for not catching the numbers, the importance of numbers. He had just fed thousands with, loaves and fishes and all that. And how many baskets did you fill with fragments afterwards? 12. Does that mean anything to you guys? 12 tribes, 12 disciples. You know where we're going with this? And how many the second time? 7 baskets. 7. Once again, that number of completion later in the church, 7 sacraments. So he's teaching about numbers as well. So very cool story. Thank you so much for that story. Thank you also again, Isaac Hansen, our Patreon shout out this week. And thanks for helping us out through patreon.com. What's your story? Love to hear it here at touchedbyheaven.net. If you come here to episode 148, you will, what will you see? Well, you'll see a little link there to kind of go into Stay Informed. And we'll send you weekly stories, other Touched by Heaven stories in this Touched by Heaven universe. All right, stay informed here at episode 148 at touchedbyheaven.net. And also thank you for keeping us a 5-star podcast in your ratings and reviews. We so appreciate that. All right, we'll do it again next week here at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.